Section 2 of Tribal Custom in Anglo-Saxon Law. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Tribal Custom in Anglo-Saxon Law by Frederic Seebohm. Chapter 1. The Currency in which Wehrgelts were reckoned and paid. Part 4. The Norman and Anglo-Saxon Currency. Working back from the known to the unknown, the facts relating to the Norman and Anglo-Saxon currency, speaking generally, confirm what has already been said of the Frankish currency, and become intelligible when the two currencies are considered together. In the first place, the Norman and Anglo-Saxon pound at the time of the Norman conquest was the pound of 7,680 wheat grains of silver, or 240 silver pence of 32 wheat grains, like that of the Nova Moneta of Charlemagne, and the Normans, like the Franks, divided it for monetary purposes into 20 shillings of 12 pence. At the same time, the Normans recognized that the Mercians had all along reckoned in silver shillings of 4 pence, and the men of Wessex in shillings of 5 pence. If we examine the actual coinage of the Anglo-Saxons, we find that, like that of the Franks, it may be divided into two periods. The earlier one corresponded to the Merovingian period, during which the penny or shat of Mercia and Wessex was of 28.8 wheat grains, like the silver tremices or pence across the Channel. Footnote. Besides these silver tremices, some silver scripula were issued, but it is with the shats mainly that we have to do. In connection with the next section, however, the fact that the scripulum was current as a coin is worth notice. End footnote. The later period commenced when Offa, in Mercia, followed by Alfred, in Wessex, abandoned the shat and issued pence like those of the Nova Moneta of Charlemagne of 32 wheat grains. So marked is the distinction between the silver pence of the two periods in type and weight that they are known by numismatists as the shat series and the penny series. Finally, just as in the case of the Frankish currency, the pound of 240 shats was the Roman pound of 6,912 wheat grains, so the pound of 240 of the later pence was the pound of the Nova Moneta of 7,680 wheat grains, which in England after the conquest became the standard or Tower pound. At the same time, it must be remembered that the identity or difference in these cases is in the reckoning in wheat grains, and that there was room for some variation in the actual weight of the coins. Part 5. The minas which survived in use side by side with the Roman pound. According to the writers of the Merovingian and later period collected by Hulch, the Roman pound was not the only standard of weight which was in customary use in Europe. We have seen that the commonly prevalent Wehrgelt of 200 gold solidi was in fact the same thing in wheat grains as the heavy Eastern and Greek gold mina of 19,200 wheat grains. But besides this, there were two other minas of interest to this inquiry, which seem to have been more or less locally in use, and more or less connected with the Wehrgelts. It seems that the Roman pound of 12 ounces was not the only pound in use in Italy. A still older Roman pound of 10 Roman ounces, or 5,760 wheat grains, seems to have existed, which was in fact a pound of 240 scripula of 24 wheat grains. And two of these pounds made what was called the mina italica of 20 Roman ounces. This mina italica survived into Merovingian times. It contained 480 Roman scripula, and according to authorities quoted by Hulch, the scripulum was so far a common unit in Gaul as to have earned the name of the denarius gallicus. The number of Roman wheat grains in the mina italica was 11,520. Its weight was 545 grams. In the Merovingian formulae and in the early charters of St. Gall, there are constant references to fines of so many librae of gold and so many pondera of silver, from which the inference may be drawn that the pondus of silver was a different weight from the libra of gold. Whether the older Roman pound or half mina italica was the pondus or not, the fact that it consisted of 240 scripula may possibly have made it a precedent for the monetary mode of reckoning of 240 pence to the pound adopted by the Franks and Anglo-Saxons. This mina italica has also a Celtic interest. It is curious to note that whilst so late as the 10th century, the Cymric galanas, or weregelt, was paid in cows, the cow was equated with a monetary reckoning in scores of pence or unci argenti, of which 12 made a pound of 240 pence. At the same time in the Cymric codes there are mentioned, as we shall find, two kinds of pence: the legal pence, probably those current at the time in England of 32 wheat grains, and the curt pence or scripula of 1/3 less, namely 24 wheat grains. Now, whilst 240 of the former would equal the pound of the Nova Moneta of Charlemagne, and of later Anglo-Saxon reckoning, 240 of the curt pence or scripula would equal the older Roman pound or half mina italica. Turning from the Cymric monetary system to that of the early Irish manuscripts and Brehon laws, we shall find that it was based on the Roman scripulum of 24 wheat grains, and not, like the Anglo-Saxon and Frankish system, on the trimissus. And we shall find that though thus based upon the scripulum and the ounce, when payments were made in gold and silver, the reckoning, instead of making use of the Roman or any other pound, counted rather in scores of ounces, that is, consciously or unconsciously, in so many of the mina italica. So much for the mina italica and its possible Anglo-Saxon and Celtic connections. The other mina, the mention of which is important, formed the probable basis of Scandinavian reckoning in marks instead of in pounds. The authorities collected by Hulch describe this mina as of 16 Roman ounces and as the mina attica. It is a fact that 16 Roman ounces did exactly equal in weight, though not in wheat grains, the light mina of 50 Attic staters, or 100 drachmas. But under Roman influence, this Attic mina no longer was divided like a mina into 100 drachmas, but had become twisted, as it were, into 16 Roman ounces and into 96 solidi of Constantine. In northern Europe, in nearly all the systems of reckoning which survived from medieval times, the pound of 12 ounces was ignored. A pound of 16 ounces had taken its place, and this pound or mina of 16 ounces lay, as we shall find, at the root of the system of the earliest Scandinavian laws, with its monetary marks, ors, and artugs, for it was the double of the mark of 8 ounces. The Russian zlotnik, or gold piece, on which the weight system of Russia is based, was theoretically identical in wheat grains with the Roman solidus, and the Scandinavian artug with the double solidus or stater. It is not needful to dwell further upon these points at this moment, but it will become important to recognize the Byzantine or Eastern origin of the mina of 16 Roman ounces when we come to consider the weregelts of northern Europe, and particularly the equation between the Danish weregelt of 8 half-marks of gold and the silver weregelts of Wessex and Mercia, as described in the compact between Alfred and Guthrum. In that compact we shall have to recognize not only the contact of two methods of monetary reckoning widely separated in origin, the one of gold and the other of silver, but also the clashing of two traditional ratios between the two metals, namely the Scandinavian ratio of 1:8 and the restored imperial ratio of 1:12 followed by the Anglo-Saxons. Part 6. The use of gold torques and armlets, etc., instead of coins. Although the amounts of the weregelts are generally stated in the laws in gold or silver currency, more or less directly equated with the cattle in which they were originally paid, it would be a great mistake to imagine that the weregelts were often paid actually in coin. A moment's consideration makes it clear that a weregelt of 100 head of cattle, whether paid as of old in cattle or in gold or silver, was a payment too large to be paid in coin. It was a payment that no ordinary individual could pay without the aid of his kindred, and it is hardly likely that so large an amount in actual coin could be collected even from the kindred of the murderer. There is plenty of evidence to show that large payments in gold and silver were mostly made by weight, and very often in gold articles, torques, armlets, and bracelets made to a certain weight. In the Skald's Tale is the well-known passage, "He to me a beog gave, on which 600 was of beaten gold, scored of shats in shillings reckoned." Whether the true meaning be 600 shats or 600 shillings, We have here a beog with its weight marked upon it. The museums of Scandinavia and of Ireland, the two poles of German and Celtic culture, are full of these gold objects, and very frequently little coils of fine gold wire are wound round them to raise their weight to the required standard. It may be mentioned further in passing that in many early Anglo-Saxon charters, payments and donations are made in gold and silver objects, and that the weights of these are sometimes stated in so many mancuses, the mancus being apparently a weight of gold or silver of 30 pence, and equated in the later laws in its silver value with the value of the ox. It may be worthwhile, before concluding this chapter, to refer to an historic example of the use of gold objects of definite weight, and of the adjustment of their value in differing currencies. The incident deserves to be noticed, and may be of use in helping to fix upon the memory the difference, so often alluded to, between the Roman pound of 6,912 wheat grains and Charlemagne's pound of 7,680 wheat grains. It belongs to the precise moment when Charlemagne, having issued his nova moneta, was contemplating his visit to Rome and the assumption of the imperial title, and it has an historical interest as showing that the nova moneta was issued before the imperial title was assumed. Alcuin, who had long resided at the court of Charlemagne, was now lying ill at Tours. In order to consult him, probably respecting the imperial title, Charlemagne, with his queen Liutgarda, proceeded to visit him at Tours. Liutgarda was apparently taken ill while there, and died June 4th, AD 800. During her illness, Alcuin sent a messenger to Paulinus, the Patriarch of Aquileia, the 2 armille of fine gold from Liutgarda, so that he and his priests might pray for her. He stated in his letter to Paulinus that these armille weighed 24 denarii less than a full pound of the nova moneta of the king. Alcuin thus weighed the bracelets in the scales of the nova moneta, and they weighed 24 pence less than the Charlemagne's pound of 7,680 wheat grains. The interesting point is that 24 pence of the nova moneta, 24 times 32, equals 768, deducted from the pound of Charlemagne, left exactly 6,912 wheat grains, so that when Paulinus weighed the gold bracelets in his Roman scales, he would find they weighed exactly a Roman pound. And yet, though writing from Charlemagne's court, Alcuin, when addressing his ecclesiastical friends in Ireland, no longer used the terms of the Frankish currency. It was, after all, a local one. Charlemagne's empire had its limits, and Ireland was beyond them. The area of ecclesiastical rule was wider than both empires put together. Alcuin writes that he and his imperial master had distributed among the Irish monasteries so many sicli of silver. The siclis, according to the authorities collected by Hulch, was equal to 2 Roman argentae, or drachmas, of silver, so that Alcuin used the didrachma, or stater, of Roman reckoning as fixed in the time of Nero, when corresponding with churches outside the empire of his Frankish master. As we proceed in our inquiries, we shall find another great ecclesiastic, Egbert, Archbishop of York and brother of the Northumbrian king, using the same Roman monetary terms in replying to the question of his clergy respecting the weregelds to be claimed in taking their proper position and rank in the Northumbrian kingdom. The answer was given in Roman argentae and sicli, and not in Frankish solidi or Anglo-Saxon shillings or any other local currency. In conclusion, the various currencies in which weregelds were paid may at first sight be perplexing, but the relevance of the facts stated in this chapter to a right understanding of the weregelds of various tribes under tribal custom, and of the amount of the weregelds to a right understanding of the constitution of tribal society, will become more and more apparent as the inquiry proceeds. End of Section 2.